Hi, and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. As the little alien at the start told you, it's Science Fiction Saturday once more. I've got two 1930s science fiction horror movies for you. At first glance, they appear to be a movie and a sequel, but the sequel ain't a sequel because in the 1930s, Hollywood studios didn't give a shit. And to be honest, that is a policy that they've continued well into the 21st century. And the movies are from 1932, a two-color technicolor pre-code movie called Doctor X, directed by Michael Curtiz and starring Lionel Atwill, Fay Wray, Lee Tracy and Preston Foster. Then we zip pan to 1939 for a black and white movie, again by Warner Brothers, The Return of Dr. X, starring Wayne Morris, Rosemary Lane, Humphrey Bogart and Dennis Morgan. So let's get started with the original Dr. X from 1932. Pre-code movies are much more interesting to me than post-code movies. Post-code sounds wrong, but the movies that were made after the Hays Code. And you can use these two movies as a good example of why. There were fewer gatekeepers on a pre-code movie. They could be a bit saucy, they could be a bit naughty, they could be more transgressive, they could be actually more entertaining. And this one definitely is. I've already talked about one of these pre-code 1930s two-color Technicolor movies before when I talked about The Mystery of the Wax Museum, also starring Lionel Atwill. Two-color Technicolor looks weird to modern audiences because you only get the reds and the greens. There's no blue in it. The process they have basically alternated frames, one with a red filter on it, one with a blue filter on it, and then when they processed it, they basically overlapped them and through some kind of 1930s technical magic made them into one film. I don't understand it, but that's what it is. You can go down the same rabbit hole on Wikipedia that I did and figure it out. The movie was based on a 1928 play, the original title of which was called Terror, by Howard W. Comstock. And they changed the title to Dr. X. So this is the original Dr. X, way before Professor X. The story, according to Wikipedia, on which I approve of this Tracy, in the film there are a series of murders in New York City. Each murder takes place under a full moon, and each body has been cannibalized post-mortem. Doctor Xavier, played by Lionel Atwill, is asked to provide his medical insight into the murders, though the police actually suspect him and the other scientists at Xavier's Medical Academy of being the Moon Killer. The Moon Killer is conducting his own experiments and is using the cannibalized body parts to assist him in those experiments. This movie combines a whole bunch of different things. It's got the gothic horror of the experiments that Dr. Xavier and his other scientists are doing. It's got a scene in a brothel, which is kind of interesting, and also has Fay Wray in it. This is Fay Wray a year before the ape got hold of her in King Kong. And she's kind of cute in this as well. The movie doesn't start with the scientists or the murders particularly. It starts with a very casual and laconic and almost comical character, a journalist called Lee Taylor, played by Lee Tracy, like comic actor. And he's quite a personable person, and he's quite a personable presence in this film. Doesn't take things seriously. He's wisecracking. His boss is about to sack him for not following through on investigating these murders. People from all different walks of life. The police are baffled. And that's why they bring in Dr. Xavier to figure out what's going on, because there's some kind of scientific rationale for what's going on. Dr. Xavier also does a lot of studies in psychopaths and is brought in because this is a serial killer as we now know them. And the cops don't know about psychology, so they bring in him as a medical expert. So this journalist, Lee Taylor, is following up on things. He's asking the cops questions. The cops know him, but they don't give him any respect. And he finds some things out. And then he's got to look for a phone to call into his office and give him the story. And he actually goes into a brothel and talks to the madam and sees the girls there and uses their telephone to call in the story. The madam at the brothel is actually played by a woman who was born in Australia, born in this very city, Melbourne. A woman called Mae Bush who moved to America when she was a child. So basically the brothel keeper is an Australian, which is kind of fun. And this is something that wouldn't have happened in a Hays Code movie, because any depiction of immorality wasn't allowed in those movies, particularly at the front end of it. The movie was very even-handed and kind of respectful of the working girls and the sex workers in the brothel and the madam himself, even though the journalist is looking at the girls and things like that. They're not treated like downtrodden, poor creatures. They're treated like just another business he goes into to make a phone call. And I like that. It plays really well to a modern sensibility. One of the things you've got to remember with movies that are over 80 years old, and this one is way over 80 years old. It's actually 93 years old, unless my numbers are wrong. They're not. Is that it's like a movie from a foreign country and a foreign time and a different culture. So you've got to kind of decrypt some of the things in the movie. Like there are a lot of references to drinking, for instance, and this movie was made during Prohibition. So like a lot of Hollywood films, it makes fun of Prohibition. It mocks it. It shows it as a system and an ideology and a set of legal barriers that just don't work. But unless you know about Prohibition, you know when it ended and all that kind of thing, those things can go over your head. So there are a lot of historical things you've kind of got to work out in a movie like this. And that's part of the fun. And the other thing from a cultural point of view that's interesting is that the journalist is at threat of his job. If he doesn't get this right, he's going to be out of a job. And this is also during the Depression when that was a non-trivial problem for somebody to lose gainful employment. And at one stage he talks about joining the army of the unemployed, which is a term that also comes up in Gabriel Over the White House, a movie I talked about a few weeks ago. I really like the way the time in which a movie is made is imprinted on the movie. And when you look at it so many years later and so many decades later, those cultural and historic points in the movie give it a texture and a depth that audiences at the time would not have seen. Taylor inveigles his way into the Academy of Dr. X, where there are a bunch of eccentric scientists. There's one guy is wheelchair bound because of an injury. Another one has one hand. He's played by Preston Foster, who turns up 3 decades later in The Time Travelers. We get another one who was a bit of a perv. We find this out because when he's supposed to be looking at scientific papers, he's actually looking at a girly magazine. So you got all of these eccentric scientists working in the academy, and all of them are suspects in this series of murders. Dr. X moves the whole academy to his country home in Long Island. From there, the murders are investigated using some really weird, almost gothic, steampunky scientific apparatuses that involve big Van de Graaff generators and enormous glass tubes with liquids going through them and electricity arcing everywhere. Really cool production design in this, and the production design of the country house, which is creepy and gothic-y, is really well done. They're incredibly high ceilings, big curtains. The railings on the balconies are very interestingly done. It's got a lot of texture to it, this film. As Joanne, played by Fay Wray, the daughter of Professor Xavier, starts falling in love kind of with Lee, and they start investigating the murders, and Dr. X tries to use his scientific knowledge and the scientific apparatus he has to work out which one of his fellow scientists is the actual murderer. So Dr. X in this is not the bad guy. He is the investigator as much as the journalist is and the cops who come in late. I'm not going to give you spoilers except to say that the murderer looks really creepy for a very specific reason, which has to do with an invention and a discovery the murderer has made. He looks monstrous. And the weird thing too is that the makeup was made by Max Factor, who were doing just cosmetics at the time. And they worked in this film to assist the production in making the monster makeup for this. It's not a particularly scary movie, but it's a really interesting one. It takes twists and turns that we wouldn't expect these days. It goes from gothic horror to light comedy, banter between characters. There's a scene where Taylor is hiding in a storage closet that's full of skeletons and jars of pickled body parts and things like that, which is kind of weird. But it's still a really fascinating little film, which is science fiction, it is horror, it's also comedy. And all of these different strands of it play off against each other. And yet somehow, miraculously, they don't clash. You've got to shift your mind between them, because going from the comedy shtick about the Depression to some really gruesome stuff for the time requires you to make those jumps yourself. But nonetheless, I found it really interesting, and that tone of comedy horror is done really adeptly. Michael Curtiz was a fine director. He went on to make things like The Adventures of Robin Hood, Casablanca, Yankee Doodle Dandy, Angels with Dirty Faces, Mildred Pierce, making really high quality, best of their era movies. But in the early 1930s, he made this weird gothic horror film, and nonetheless kept it entertaining, kept the pace moving along, and gave us not only meet cutes and social commentary and weird, elaborate, baroque-looking scientific apparatus, but kept me entertained all the way through it. I really enjoyed the film, and I recommend it to you. Now, the reason I watched the film isn't because of the film, it's because of the movie that also bears part of its name. I had some credit on Amazon.com, so I decided to get The Return of Dr. X, which stars Wayne Morris, Rosemary Lane, Humphrey Bogart, and Dennis Morgan, which has the name but is not a sequel. It's got very much the same tone, that kind of light, bantery stuff combined with some gruesome horror, but it's a Hays Code movie. It doesn't have the grit and the texture of a pre-Code movie. And Humphrey Bogart said that this is a movie, we went to Jack Warner when he was given this as an assignment and demanded more money because he was getting paid weekly wage by Warner Brothers at the time. And so he asked for more money because he hated the film. For me, it looks like he hated the film more because he was way down the cast list. He wasn't a star in it. His character, even though he is Dr. X, using another name, is a different Dr. X. And his character is, in some ways, a secondary character in the narrative. And the blurb from IMDb says, a hotshot reporter and a young doctor team up to investigate a series of grisly murders and a mysterious sample of synthetic blood. So there's a bit of blood in this as well. And again, you start out with a wisecracking journalist. This time, a guy called Walter Garrett, played by Wayne Morris. Wayne Morris was an interesting guy. Wasn't particularly good in this. I mean, he's not as good as Lee Tracy is in the first one, but he does okay. The thing about Wayne Morris is, World War II became a fighter ace. He took down a whole bunch of Japanese Zeros and got medals for it. But when he came back to Hollywood after the war, he only had jobs in B-Westerns and things like that, so his career arc fell off a cliff. Still, all credit to him for that. Tough guy. And as the movie progresses, his character gets a little more warm. And I think Wayne Morris, as an actor, finds the character and settles into it the further the movie progresses, which is kind of interesting. If you watch that closely, it's an interesting arc in the way he plays the character. His friend the Doctor is played by Dennis Morgan, a guy who was mostly known as a light tenor. He did musicals with Doris Day later on, but he's personable as Mike Rhodes the Doctor. He's also really good in a World War II propaganda movie that Warner Brothers did called Thank You Lucky Stars, which has weird things like Errol Flynn and Betty Davis singing. If you haven't seen Thank You Lucky Stars, you should watch that one. We also have a love interest for Dennis Morgan's character, Rosemary Lane's nurse, Joan Vance, and she does a pretty good job of it. Attractive woman, fairly good actress. The story starts out with Garrett interviewing a stage actress. He's got a deal to interview her for the newspaper he works for. And he goes to her apartment and she's dead. There's a big wound under her rib cage and she's flatlined dead. And that severely upsets her pet spider monkey. She has a pet spider monkey as well, because who the hell didn't in those days? You could buy the mail order. So obviously he calls the cops. Cops get there, the body's gone. He tells his boss, and tries to get the story done about the disappearing body. Nobody believes this actress, Angela Morova, has actually died because there's no body, there's no proof that she's died at all. And she turns up at the newspaper to tell them she's going to sue them for a false story about her being dead. Garrett gets his mate, the doctor, Mike, to help him investigate this, and they find a sample of synthetic blood. They go to a hematologist that Rhodes knows, a guy called Dr. Francis Flegg, played by John Littell, and he dismisses it, saying it's a normal sample of blood, don't worry about it. Littell has an assistant, a guy called Marshall Kane, played by Humphrey Bogart, who's got a white streak through his hair and he's pasty and pale. He looks like a marble. And therein lies the story. He's actually a Doctor Xavier, who was executed for the crime of starving a child to death as a scientific experiment in a little cabin in the woods. But Flegg actually resurrected him because Xavier was a good scientist. Flegg needed him for his research into synthetic blood. And so using a procedure he had and the synthetic blood, he resurrects Xavier, gives him the name of Cain, and he becomes his assistant so they can work together and try to find a way to make this synthetic blood work. Problem is, Cain keeps needing transfusions of a formula that is based on a very rare blood group. And the nurse is one of the people who has that rare blood group. They're killing people to get the blood so that they can keep this potion going. And X/Cain can stay alive while this happens. They also used it on Angela Morova to keep her alive. But it's very much a watered down movie compared to the gritty gothicness of Dr. X. But it's not without its features of interest. We get an assistant at the newspaper. He's played by Hans Hall from the Bowery Boys, a guy called Pinky. And he plays it fairly straight and does a good job as a kind of minor character who is assisting in the research that Garrett is doing into the newspaper and into not only Dr. X, but also Dr. Francis Flegg, the guy he's working with. But it's interesting to compare and contrast the two, because the Hays Code movie, The Return of Dr. X, it doesn't have the texture and the flavour and the charisma of the previous movie, where they could go have a character walk into a brothel and make a phone call, and you could have the implications of cannibalism and the ickiness of that as a part of the backstory in the movie. This one is purely blood, and what you see is large syringes that dip down out of frame to do the blood letting and things like that. And they've got to be careful the way they talk about things and resurrecting corpses. There's a scene where Garrett and Rhodes dig up the grave of Dr. Xavier and find there's nothing in the box. So there's a little bit of that kind of gothic horror there. And they're talking about how important blood is to scientific research. And there's the science fiction aspect of it, where to show them how his experiments work, Flegg actually resurrects a dead rabbit. But Flegg resurrects it using an injection of his special formula and a whole bunch of electricity, because you've got to use electricity when you've got the Van de Graaff generators around. Because, a bit of sparking and electricity always looks good in this kind of movie. I still enjoyed the film. I didn't mind it at all. I liked the rapport between Wayne Morris's character and Dennis Morgan's. I think they play off each other well. The mystery is kind of interesting, having at the start a dead woman who turns up alive, and then having the characters follow through on that. In some ways, that journalistic investigation parallels the plot of the original Dr. X, which is probably why they gave it the title of The Return of Dr. X. But it does show that watering down of genre films that occurred when the Hays Code, the production code, came in. And you couldn't have the movies that were as edgy and as interestingly textured as the first Dr. X, as Mystery of the Wax Museum, as a whole bunch of other pre-code horror movies were. Letting the tight-ass conservatives have their way in Hollywood was a big mistake. It was done as a cynical move by the studios to allow the production code so that the government wouldn't take things over and control them. And so they set up the production code as a self-regulation thing. And they allowed their creations to be watered down because they wanted to keep control of their businesses. I recommend that one. I was a bit surprised because I got this from America, and it is a Warner Archive collection release. No region coding on it. It played fine in my PlayStation 4, which is sitting just below the camera here. I put it in there just on the off chance it will play. No region coding at all. So if you want a copy of this, I'll put a link to it in the description of the video, and I recommend you get it. It's still fun, but it's not as fun as Dr. X. I talked about Lionel Atwill in the previous video where I was talking about the Mystery of the Wax Museum and how his career got cut short because the police found out he was showing adult films at parties in his house. There was a police investigation. The studio used the moral clause in his contract, and his career kind of went downhill. because of that contract getting cancelled by Warner Brothers. Times have changed a lot. I'm fairly sure there are any number of modern actors who watch adult films in their houses these days, and nothing is thought of it. So there you go. Two 1930s science fiction horror films. Similar names, but actually not related to each other. Similar frameworks in, wisecracking journalist investigates murders and things progress from there. I definitely think the first one is the more vivid movie, and the second one, even though Humphrey Bogart is in it, playing in his only science fiction or horror film, I don't think he really gives his best in this. I don't think he put any real effort into his character, which is a shame. I know any number of actors in a more modern era who jump and change between different genres of film and still manage to be very professional and be very adept at what they do in those films. But in the 1930s, I don't think Bogart had that regard for what he did. And there could be reasons why. Humphrey Bogart was in a very bad marriage to Mayo Metho at the time, and the marriage was full of booze and arguments and fights. They were known as the battling Bogarts at the time. So he wasn't in a happy place in his life at the time. And it's only in the early 1940s where his career took off. But I think he could have given more to this film than he did, and that's a bit of a disappointment. So that's what I got for you this time. Two gothic horror science fiction films from the 1930s, both of which are worth watching. But the one with the dodgy technicolor is the one you really want to see. So thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe in particular, because I am currently 48 subscribers away from 15,000, and my birthday is in 6 days. And I would really like more subscribers to hit that milestone on or before my birthday. Yes, it's an arbitrary thing, and yes, it's a bit selfish, but I am a flawed vessel. You can also support the channel by becoming a channel member, by donating through YouTube, or becoming a patron at patreon.com/terrytalksmovies. Next up, I've got Monday's video, and I've got a haul that I was sent by a subscriber and a Patreon supporter, which I'm going to talk about in that video. And it's pretty bloody good, to be honest with you. And then we get the Wednesday video and Science Fiction Saturday once more. So until all of that stuff happens, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies, watch some horror science fiction movies, and I'll catch you next time.